Welcome to this video on painting with inktense pencils. I'm going to show you what I do on the cockatoo that I've already quilted. The general mixture that you'll see me using throughout this video is a mixture of aloe vera gel and water. Make sure your mix leans more towards the aloe vera gel. It makes the bleeding of the color through the fabric much less. It sort of contains the color in the area that you want it. Right, I'm going to show you how I use the solution before I start coloring. It's literally just a matter of taking your paintbrush, dip it in the solution and dampen the area that you want to color in. Try and stay between the stitch lines as much as possible. Right, once you've dampened it, it's literally just a matter of taking your pencil and colouring the area in that you want to apply the colour to, the area that you've already dampened. To intensify the color, once you've colored it in and you feel that it's not quite bringing out the pigment completely, you can go over it with your brush again. Now let's look at another way that we can do it. You'll see that I haven't colored in the dampened area yet. I'm letting that dry just a little bit. But you can also take your pencils over dry fabric and color that in first. The results are slightly different and it's not my preferred method, but it does have its place in the process. Now you can also see in areas where it is already a little bit damp from where I used the solution earlier, but the pigment is already reacting. That's fine, it's not an issue in this method. Right, I've coloured it in and now I'm going to take the same solution, the aloe vera gel with water that I've been using up until now, and I'm going to dampen over the colour that I've applied. Immediately the pigment starts reacting. You'll notice that I use like different strokes, and the video is speeded up, but you can see in places where I sort of flatten the brush, it just allows a bit more moisture to go into the fabric, which is the water that's actually drawn in more than the aloe vera gel. It just helps to spread the pigment a little bit more and bring out the color. You want to use all the pigment while it's still damp. And then I can just go and add some more color around the areas that I want to, just to bring it out and make it a little bit darker in places. Can you see how much the color is already bleeding? There's too much water in the solution. It does happen, but there are ways to make this work for you. and there's also ways that you can fix this. I'm not too hassled about where it's going. I am going to be continuing with the color down there, slight variation of it, so it is going to use it in any event. So now I'm just going to go back to the areas that I dampened previously, and I'm just going to play around with my color, mix them, add some red, make them a little bit more intense. You can see I'm not coloring in completely because I'm going to take the brush and I'm going to use the brush to spread the color over those areas. And you can just add some more of the solution to the area that you're coloring in to help you spread the pigment. So the shapes are getting a bit lost with the similarity in the color. When it dries it will be clearer, but to ensure that the shapes are more defined, I'm going back to the pencils and bringing in the dark indigo. It's a lovely dark color that's more blue than black, but it brings a lovely color to all the shapes. After the dark color, I'm bringing the white back. The white is great to bring some highlights to your shapes. It also, especially with the quilting, if you add it to the middle of the shapes, it sort of really lifts it out and enhances the sort of bubble-like shape that the quilting creates. It's worth mentioning that all this layering with the different colors on top of each other, adding the reds, then the pinks, then the blues, and now the blacks and the whites, it does create quite a thick layer of pigment. It helps to bring the mixture back again, the solution, the aloe vera with water, and going over it, but it never really reduces all that layering. So bear that in mind when you are doing this. If you would prefer it to be thinner, it will be more flexible once it's dried. With all of this pigment on top of each other, it does get quite thick, so it does make the fabric a little bit harder. So consider the project and where you're going to be using this when you do this. So again, I'm just going back over the yellow with white just to dull it down a bit. It just seemed a little bit too yellow compared to the pink that I've got going on. So once I'm done here, I'm actually going to leave it overnight to dry before I continue with other shapes around it. Cool, day 2. So I'm going to start mixing some colors using the inktense blocks. I'm literally just using a plastic knife and grating some pigment off of the blocks. I'm going to create a lighter shade of pink, so it's your basic color theory. Red plus a bit of white gives you pink. To mix it, I'm just going to use plain aloe vera gel at this stage, literally just squirt a bit in there and then take my brush to mix it. So as you can see, it gives you that lovely, really intense color. It's a little bit harder to paint it over some pleats and that in the fabric, but it just gives you that really, really intense color. To water it down a little bit, I just put my brush in a bit of water, mix it again in the pigment and the aloe vera. It just helps to make it a little bit more sort of spreadable. Also, the pigment dries, well, not dries, it gets a bit clunky. So to ensure that you can still use it and continue using it, I'll just add a little bit of water to it. I haven't got a large quantity going here. I do want to mention that once you've mixed a color like this, you need to use it and finish it. If it dries, you're not going to be able to use it anymore. The pigment's been activated. So once it's dry, the pigment's sort of gone on strike, to say, for lack of a better word. And of course you can see I'm not really concerned about the bleed from yesterday. The color that I'm putting over it is really just accommodating that bleed. So this is one way that you don't need to worry about the bleed, because if you're going to use a similar color around it and over it, it's just going to absorb the bleed. Great, so now I want to show you, I want to utilize the color that I've got there already, but I don't want to make it as intense. So to help with the spread, I'm literally just using aloe vera gel directly onto my brush and using that to spread the color a little bit further down. It lightens it up, it brings it a bit more to like a watercolor look, and it helps to just reduce the intensity. Right, I've got some bleed to contend with again, so back to the white. I'm applying some aloe vera directly onto the pencil to literally wetten the pencil and turn it into a very intense paintbrush, and I'm colouring over that bleed. And then again, just bringing in the darker color to outline my shape and accentuate the shape of the eye. So exactly the same as before, again just using my plastic knife to shave off some pigment off of the blocks. I'm going to create an intense dark purple, so it's blue, red and white. I am making quite a bit because I have quite a few shapes that I want to utilize this color on. Remember what I said before, when you've mixed this you need to use all the colors, so all of the color up, so don't leave it overnight, you won't be able to use it tomorrow. So it is like a really thick gel based color once you've done that. So to just spread it a little bit more, I am adding a few drops of water, and then I'm going to add my white. So throughout this you can see me mixing the pigment and the colorings over the quilt. I'm really just doing it so that it comes on camera, so that you can see what I'm doing. But please rather do this on the side. As I'm shaving it, you can actually see even there on the container, the shavings does spread. So I'm not concerned about it on this quilt because my background is going to utilize all of these colors. I'm going to show you later how I do that, very fun. But yeah, just bear that in mind, so rather do it on the side. Right, so now you can also see I've decided to dampen the area where I'm going to use it. The pigment is very intense, so I'm going to distribute a little bit more so that I can get some definition from the darker color over a lighter color. And then bringing in the red, I'm not too happy with the blue, it's just a little bit too blue, so I'm bringing the red in to make it a little bit more purple. And then on the other side, just starting with the red rather than the mixed color, and then I'm going to go over it. Which brings me to another way of mixing color, really is your mix in your palette. And first coloring in the area with a different color. In this case I'm using the red, so that I can create a more intense purple rather than a very dark blue. So now I've already got quite a bit of color on my brush and I'm going to use that. So I'm just going to dip it directly into the aloe vera solution and paint with it. And again, remember this video is sped up, so I don't really paint that fast. Right, and again, to control a bit of bleed, just throw in the white. So this is another way that you can use to mix your colors. Instead of using your white pencil to add some highlighting, just grate some of the white over it and then use your paintbrush to do a little bit of spread and painting. So now another way that you can add color is to run your brush damp over the inktense blocks. It then puts the pigment on the paintbrush so that you can then paint onto your fabric. Right, so sometimes you've got a lot of pigment on your paintbrush and you don't want to stick it into your solution with your aloe vera gel because it will transfer too much of the pigment into that solution. Just use a clean paintbrush, dip it in the solution and then add it to your fabric. It'll have the same effect as having had your normal paintbrush that you've been brushing with the whole time. It's just that it's clean. So yes, I am at risk of repeating myself, but again, I've already mixed this color, so I need to use it before I move on to any other colors because once it's dry, it's not usable. So there are some circles in this area that I just painted, and to just bring them out I'm using my white pencil, and that's all. I'm just coloring over it with the white pencil. Right, so if you've got an area that you think is big enough to handle your inktense blocks themselves, you can use them as you would a pencil and color that area in. I've got some bleed going on here, so I'm utilizing the damp that's already coming through from there and applying my inktense block and then going over it with my damp paintbrush. Your stitches from your quilt creates a bit of a groove there, which takes a little bit of effort to color in. If you've got a contrasting thread going on here, the contrasting thread will bring that outline through. But I want all of it to blend together so that the quilting actually falls into the cockatoo. So to do that, I'm literally just filling in that groove with my color using my paintbrush. So I've mentioned that you can use the blocks to color your fabric in. That's exactly what I'm doing here first. I'm using my block, adding some color, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to blend that. So let's start with aloe vera directly on the paintbrush and try and get a full tube to start with. I'm just dabbing it onto the spots, the little spots that I created over there. And then I'm going to add the same plain straight aloe vera directly to the color that I've already created in this area. Now I bring my aloe vera and water solution closer and I start blending that color further and further down. You'll see how it gets a little bit lighter. I'm going to add some other color to this now. You can see why this is so much fun, because I really don't care about the small spaces. I am just going for it. Have fun with this pigment and enjoy what you're doing. So I've colored in, and I'm really just going to use the bleed, the damp from the other color that I've already done, and see just how far that seeps into my pigment. Add a little bit more color and definition as you want, but I'm now going to leave it and see what happens with the bleed coming through there before I add more moisture to this area. I'm going to move on to another area, dampen it with a brush first. I'm just using the exact same brush, and I haven't cleaned up all the pigment that's already on it. I'm not too concerned with that. I think it's going to blend with the color that I'm going to use now. Pencil directly to the damp area. I'm not really intensely coloring in. I'm going to use the brush to blend it with another color. Did some more coloring on the feathers with the yellow that I was already using. Now I'm adding another color, literally blending the two together and creating more definition, still utilizing the bleed that was going on over there. More pencil to the yellow, and then it is time to blend. So I'm using a brush, but I'm drying it first. I had it in water. I'm drying it with a tissue because I don't want too much bleed happening here. I want to blend it using the damp and the pigment that is already in that place. When the brush itself gets too much pigment on it, again, in the solution, dry it out a little bit with a tissue and continue with the blending. So the damp didn't bleed enough into my other color that I had over here, the red. So I'm going to add some more moisture and get the bleed to carry through. Now also remember, I've got my stitch line there and I want the color to really go into that area. So I'm really concentrating on the stitch line. Right, I'm going to move on to a different area. I'm going to leave the area that I just worked on that's already damp and just let it bleed and see where the color goes. I'm going to the beak. It's next to an area that I'm already aware of is dry. I painted that yesterday. So let's use a different color. I'm going to dampen this area first and then use the coloring pencils. So I'm not concerned about the pink bleeding into the beak at this point. You can see it's gotten a little bit damp from the pre-dampening with the solution. I'm not worried about bleed from the pink because it's already dry. The pigment has already been activated, it's gone through the process, it's not going to bleed into the beak now. This is why I mentioned earlier, and I keep on repeating, that you need to use your mixture that you've made, the color that you've already mixed, finished. You can't leave it and use it the next day, it simply won't do anything. I want more definition on the crown, so I'm taking my indigo pencil and going over my stitch lines, bringing them out and making them darker and clearer. As you can see, I also use the indigo pencil on the body area of the bird. And then I use my brush and solution just to blend that darkness and the dark lines into the other colors. This just softens the line so that it's not as stark. And then I leave it to dry overnight. Moving over to the feet or the claws, I'm going to dampen the area with my solution first, still the aloe vera and water. Nice big brush so that I can be more effective and spread the moisture. orange pencil over the stitch lines, nice and dark, really intense, and then I'll pull the yellow closer. Time for something a little bit different. I'm going to dampen the area first with my aloe vera water solution, and then I'm going to add some really nice deep dark blue and blend it. So first the inktense block, it gives you a nice thick line. Deepen the color with the pencil. And then bring the brush and wipe the color, sort of stroke it into the area that hasn't got the color. You're going to end up with a really nice deep dark edge and a much lighter center. I promised I'd show you every way that I use this. So in this way I've dipped the pencil into my aloe vera water solution and I'm painting with the pencil. I want a really thin line. So now I'm going to show you the similar method to what I did with the dark blue, except I'm going to reverse it. I'm going to use the inktense block first, and then I'm going to add the aloe vera water solution to that. And then I'm going to leave it and let it bleed and see what I get from that. Same thing, red inktense block, and then I'm going to add the blue inktense block over that, and then add my aloe vera water solution, and again leave it and let it bleed. I managed to get a lovely purple this time. Never get the same color twice. So I'm concentrating on the center of these leaves. I'm going to blend them. The absolute intensity that you can get when you mix your own colors is just beautiful. And then you change your color as you go along. If you decide that you want a slightly different shade, just add another pigment from a different color, or the same pigment that you've already got in that color, and change it that way and continue. I'm now going to use my solution more, and I'm going to create color using the solution, a little bit of my already mixed color plus the color that's already on the cloth, and I'm going to fill in the spaces that haven't got color yet. Moving on to what I call the Smarties, going all around the cockatoo. I'm using up the last bit of color that I've still got left that I've already mixed and randomly picking a Smartie and coloring it in. I did later change my mind, I'll show you towards the end, and I actually made all those Smarties one color, a darker color. Time for the biggest brush that I've got. This is a chalk paint wax brush that I've used. I wet the areas in the background, like really wet. You can see I'm far away from the border and the cockatoo at this point. It is still wet, I've actually not even left it to dry as yet. I'm using up a little bit of my leftover color. Be careful when you do that. I have got spots that it hasn't quite blended in completely. Essentially what you're doing is you're taking your nice huge big wax brush that can take a lot of water, and you're wetting the background, adding color and just rubbing that in as much as you can so that it really can bleed through the fabric. Now, much better to use is to wet your fabric with your wax brush and then do the scraping technique. Take your inktense block, your plastic knife, and scrape pigment all over the wet area. Add your different color. Remember, I'm going for purple here, so I'm using blue and red. And just scraping all over that. And then the absolute fun part is taking this wax brush and just like in a circular movement, as rough as you can, spread that pigment, let it bleed, use the moisture that you've got in that fabric, and look at the stunning effect that you get. Right, so I left the background to dry, and in the process the damp has actually gone through to my Smartie blocks. I did change the colouring of this later, so I'm not really worried, and I'm not worried about the bleed too much either, because I am still going to do the background directly behind the cockatoo, and that bleed will then blend away. And if you're in a bit of a hurry, pull closer your GHD hairdryer and dry the spots. Right, my dots are dry, my Smarties. Now I'm going to show you an alternative to the wetting and grating. I actually take my inktense block, rub all over the area that I want to color, and get some pigment on that fabric. Again, using both colors, and then I do use exactly the same nice huge big thick brush with water on it, and I dab it all over this area. Right, so as I mentioned, I wanted to show you that I made the Smarties darker than they were originally. all I did was take the indigo pencil and color over them. Remember, those Smarties were dry already, so I just colored in over them. You will see some of the color still coming through a little bit, but I think it just adds to the character. And then finally, add some bling, add some buttons. I put some buttons around the cockatoo itself. Remember, that area I didn't quilt at all. I did throw this piece into the tumble dryer to heat set it after all the painting, and I think in the process the fabric has shrunk, and because of I didn't have that area quilted, that area has now turned into a little bit puffy, so please keep that in mind. To try and counter that, I've added some buttons so that there is a little bit of quilting in there, and I added some crystals to some areas and circles in the cockatoo. I hope you guys enjoyed this. What I want to ask you after this now is to go and work on your own project and send me pictures. You can send them to my email address or go and visit our website and leave a comment under the blog post for this video. I look forward to hearing from you guys. Keep well.